Hey, welcome back to another video. There are lots of ways to tell a story. You can do it in a book, utilizing an array of descriptions and metaphors to paint a picture of the events for the reader to envision. You can do it in a movie or TV show, giving actual physical presence to a world that might exist only in your mind, giving people a look at just what you can come up with. But a very unorthodox way to tell a story, and a way that I've come to like very much recently, is through cards. Specifically, these ones. Yu-Gi-Oh! Certainly needs no introduction at this point, considering it's a massive franchise even outside of the card game, but today I want to talk about an aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh! And most card games in general really, that tends to go overlooked: flavor text. Flavor text is generally used to build a world surrounding the card you hold in your hand, give it some character, or use it to build upon another card in the game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is certainly not the only card game to do this, Magic probably being the best example of it, though I'll be focusing entirely on Yu-Gi-Oh's use of it because that's the card game that I'm most familiar with. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't use this quite as much as Magic, because just look at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card, where are you gonna put it? But this is where we find great value in the game's oldest, least complex kind of card: regular, plain old vanilla, normal monster cards. These cards have no effect, so this big box here is reserved entirely for storytelling. And now we're just gonna look at a few of my favorites. From the cool, to the silly, to the legitimately tragic, we'll get into a veritable smorgasbord of cards here. Let's start off with some pretty generic flavor text. Aerator is a card printed in Japan in 1999's Volume 6 set, and is one of many normal monsters that the TCG never got. Thankfully, it has appeared in a couple of video games, so we did get to enjoy this card's kind of terrifying text. It's basically if the Oxygen Destroyer from Godzilla had legs, and based on the look it's giving, hated you. I'm also left with some questions about this thing, lore-wise. Despite being categorized as a fiend type, it's pretty clear to me that it is a machine, so what madman made this thing, and for what purpose? Is it malicious and just exists to cause thousands upon thousands of deaths, or is it made to combat some other, somehow more horrifying creature, like a Star Eater or something? We're never going to know, but this card remains both terrifying and fascinating to me. This one's real simple, and I just think it's kind of funny. This is Battle Warrior, a monster probably no one has thought about since it came out 8 years ago, but its flavor text is glorious. This would be totally unremarkable if not for the 3 exclamation points at the end that makes it sound like whoever wrote this was super jazzed about the fact that this guy doesn't use weapons to fight. The Japanese flavor text doesn't have that punctuation, but when they printed the card here, I guess somebody at Konami America was really excited. Rabid Dragon is another fun one, if only for the sudden change in tone between the 2 sentences of its flavor text. The first sentence sounds so joyful and happy, like something you'd hear in a commercial for a kid's toy, and then the second makes this hard turn into threatening and tells you that if you run into this thing, it's gonna fucking kill you. That notion is definitely supported by the way that it looks, because this thing is in no way cute and cuddly like that first sentence implies. It's such a wild example of mood whiplash, and I have never been able to forget it. Next, we have a whole bunch of cards that all have a pretty similar gimmick to them. Alligator's Sword here is an ancient card, debuting in the Japanese OCG all the way back in 2000, and being one of Joey's staple cards in the anime, despite not seeing print in the US until 2010 in a promotional booster. Its original flavor text is pretty generic, as were many old-school normal monsters, but its English flavor text is something special. Written in Joey's signature Brooklyn accent, this card is elevated from pretty forgettable to legendary status. This card, along with 8 more of Joey's cards, were printed in the Legendary Collection 4, and they all feature this wonderful writing style. Skullstalker and Kage Ningen are both highlights, but my favorite of them is Anthrosaurus, because not only does it throw an insult your way, but it also has Joey's nyeh at the end of it, which adds a whole new layer of cheese, and I adore it. Going more recent, we've got Clavicus, the Magic-y Sky Blaster, who was printed just this year in Dawn of Majesty. This card's flavor text reads like the intro to a shonen anime, which I feel like was kind of the idea, and it really nailed it. It brings to mind the explanation of equivalent exchange at the beginning of Fullmetal Alchemist, and combined with how it refers to other Magic-y cards like Magic-y World and Magic-y Unlocking, creates the feeling of an existing world, just within this short passage. Alright, we've had our fun with the more silly or generally light cards. Now it's time to move into the more serious ones. First up is the Inpachi line of cards. The original Inpachi first saw print stateside in 2003's Pharaonic Guardian, and it's got a pretty basic text, again, like many normal monsters did at the time. What makes it interesting though is how it progresses through the various Inpachis. Inpachi's next stage, Blazing Inpachi, gives it a bit more spice, letting us know that it's strong, but it is still wood on fire, and then it isn't going to last, as we can see in Charcoal Inpachi, a card that's almost somber and I would really love if it weren't for the dumb line about barbecue that kinda takes away the impact created by the first line combined with the artwork. This line is also more or less present in the Japanese flavor text, so this is not Konami of America's fault. Inpachi's final incarnation is Woodborg Inpachi, the burnt-out wood spirit being rebuilt by the recurring Yu-Gi-Oh monster Kozaki to live once more. The Inpachi line is generally pretty forgettable in terms of actual usability, but their flavor text and the progression of a pretty bland monster overall is super interesting to me. Now we got one more set of cards for the serious aspect, and they were actually the inspiration behind me wanting to make this video in the first place. Starting with Dragonhunter, we're told of a woman who went off to obtain the horns of dragons in hopes of finding a cure for the plague ravaging her home, only for the dragons to destroy her village. Continuing in Revenge Rally, the hunter has turned her quest to one of revenge, obviously, and is just slaying dragons now. Finally, it all comes to an end with Dragon Core Hexer, the hunter having been cursed by the blood of the dragons, spreading probably the very plague she originally set out to cure, but she can no longer even recall why she's been killing dragons for so long to begin with. If ever there was an example of how cards can tell a story, these three are it. The whole thing plays like the bad ending in an RPG or something, and it's another one that I've never forgotten since the day I first saw these cards. Now, just so that we don't end on such a dour story, let's take a look at one more, Mech Knight Avram. This card's flavor text is dumb, and not the good kind of dumb, like the Joey cards, just dumb. Three little words that, taken on their own, aren't horrible, but when you learn that this is the Japanese flavor text, suddenly makes it seem like Konami of America just decided not to bother with this one. This serves as a good example of funny card text sometimes being actually a really bad idea, especially when the original just isn't supposed to be anything like this. The Japanese text reads like an ancient prophecy, passed down for thousands of years, and has several references to other Mech Knight cards, as well as a few World Chalice cards. Both archetypes with lore so extensive and bleeding into others that I could probably make a couple of videos on them alone. And even ignoring the wider lore surrounding this card, it probably has one of the best bits of flavor text in the entire game, if only for how epic it sounds on its own. But Konami of America were just like, yeah, but what if we made it a dumb joke instead? And look, I love dumb jokes, but maybe don't put them on cards that really aren't very funny, and in fact are connected to one of the more serious storylines Yu-Gi-Oh cards have ever told. This has been a bit of an unorthodox video, not really what I tend to cover, but I hope I was able to convey why I like flavor text in Yu-Gi-Oh so much. Just through a small text box and some truly wicked art, you can tell stories that are good, even if it just goes by what is essentially a general synopsis of events. There are plenty of other Yu-Gi-Oh cards with cool flavor text, like Alien Shock Trooper, Watt-Tailed Dragon, or Ally Mind, and plenty of other card games with great flavor text that I might end up talking about at some point in the future, but that's going to be it for now, and I will see you guys next time.